Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Product Ops HQ Meetup. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Anna Andrade, and I'm your community manager at Product Ops HQ, and I'm also part of Dragonboat's team. Let's just give a couple of minutes for everyone to join. And actually, I'm just seeing a lot of folks joining. So meantime, feel free to say hi in the chat and tell us where you are joining in from. As for me, I'm tuning in from Coimbra, Portugal. And today I'm super excited to host this session because this is a really hot topic that we've been discussing in our community. We will start with a fireside chat between two product veterans, and it's followed by audience Q&A. So please drop your questions in the Q&A as we go, and we will try to address as many questions as possible at the end. If we run out of time, we can always continue the conversation in our Slack. Leah is going to drop a link for you in the chat so you can join us. And yes, we are recording this session, so you will be able to catch the replay afterwards. And before I bring in our guests for today, I would like to give a quick word about our sponsor. So as I mentioned, we are seeing a lot of conversations in our community. And now more than ever, the way we run products is really being challenged. And that's why we are here today, right? So AI is speeding up the build and touching every part of the PDLC. And this speed is really exciting, right? But it also creates a new kind of complexity. So most product teams are really finding that this bottleneck is now shifting to other parts of the PDLC, other portfolio calls, shakier alignments, and even messier dependencies. And the problem is that if your strategy, your roadmaps, and team decisions are living in different tools and different places, you have some data, but it's not operational, right? And it's not connected. You can align around it, you can scale it, and you can let your AI tools work from it, right? So that's the problem that Dragonboat was built to solve. It's the operating foundation where your data and your product model live. And this gives your execs, your builders, and your agents shared context and memory so that they can strategize and deliver product investments that actually move the needle for your business. So if you want to learn more, check out dragonboat.ai. Or if you want to drop me a DM in our Slack, I'm also happy to connect you to one of our product experts. And speaking about product experts, I'm really happy to introduce you to our guide for today, Becky Flint. Becky is a product and tech executive based in Silicon Valley, and she has built and scaled product teams, portfolio management, and product operations globally for both startups and Fortune 500 companies, including PayPal, BigCommerce, Shutterfly, and Feedzai, and during their rapid growth and transformation phases. Currently, Becky is the founder and CEO of Dragonboat with a mission to enable every product team to achieve more impact faster. So Becky, is really great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. And joining Becky today is Hakan Yilmaz. Hakan is Director of Product Portfolio Operations at Advisor 360, where he leads product strategy, roadmap operations, and cross-functional alignment across the company's wealth management platform. Before Advisor 360, Hakan was Director of Product Management at Broadridge Advisor Solutions, where he brought some machine learning-powered SaaS products to market, scaled product teams from ground up, and led portfolio strategy through M&A integrations. So welcome, Hakan, and thank you for so much for joining us today.
Yep, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Time to pass the mic over to Becky and Hakan. See you guys.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
All right, let's get started. Well, Hakan, so great to meet you today and hear some of the chatter already around how AI is impacting and influencing and changing how your organization. So maybe we can get started with a little bit brief intro on your company and then also how AI is being introduced. Then we can go, kick off some other related conversation. And along the way, maybe I can bring in some of the questions, observations that we also have as we work and talk to other customers. Obviously ourselves as well. Happy to add that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll jump in then. So Advisor 360 is a financial services firm, or a wealth tech firm more specifically, which provides an advisor desktop for financial advisors. One of the interesting quirks is that our clients are the firms that they're affiliated with or they work for, whereas our users are the actual financial advisors themselves. So there's a B2B2C component of the industry. And the other thing to bear in mind with this industry, it's very highly regulated. FINRA, SEC, a lot of these government level organizations, which monitor risk and compliance and so on. So it's a very risk averse industry. And part of it as well is that advisors tend to have a reputation which is very hard to earn and very easy to lose. So there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to adopting AI. So we've kind of accounted a lot of that as we've thought about introducing it within our company and within our product. I think the first point I'll make is that when it comes to introduction of AI, there are maybe three different prongs to it, which are worth pointing out. One is actually introduction of AI within the product itself. And in that sense, we started by introducing individual chatbot type agents for a particular workflow or particular task to gain efficiency for the end user. That's what we've done and what we've kind of built on top of. What we learned from that is that you need to do more. You need to have an underlying, not a fundamentally sound data structure that agents can sit on top of and talk to. We can get more into that further down the line. That's prong number one. Number two is actually within the PDLC itself. So, obviously, I think people are aware that using things like Augment or Claude Code, engineers can code faster and do more. Testing is easier. Everything moves faster at that end of the kind of SDLC, PDLC spectrum. So what that means is they have more capacity to do more things. The obvious solution there is just they can do more tickets, they can do more of the same work, but there are more things you can do within the PDLC to make better use of the fact of AI adoption, not just at the individual application level, but at the workflow level. And then the third prong is operational, which is what I'm more interested in. It's actually enabling the entire organization to adopt AI as a company, not just at an individual level, but at an organizational level. So implementing collective workflows that we can all use and all benefit from, going from AI assistance to AI augmentation to being AI native. I feel like that's the journey we're all on. I don't think anyone in the industry has actually made it and said, yes, we've done it. But we're learning along the way, and it's really fun to share ideas and information with you, Becky.
Yeah, wow, that's such an information-rich overview. So let me unpack that a little bit. So the first part you mentioned is around how you introduce some of the AI product capabilities in your own product, right? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something around having chatbots and access to users to have some guidance. And then you realize there are some, it's not enough, right? You mentioned something not enough. So what I'm hearing are two things. And you also mentioned something very interesting, and we're happy to double click on that as well, mm-hmm. is the underlying data. So let's talk a little bit on, when you bring in chatbots and the capabilities to your end users, well, actually your B2B2C, so that maybe to your, like the first interaction user, right? We definitely see companies going through that as well, especially with an existing domain expertise-based product. How does it change in terms of how your internal product PDLC evolved to support that capability?
So I think one of the things we learned along the way is having your internal operationalization kind of set up in such a way that people are day-to-day experimenting and playing with AI and AI tools and learning themselves. That naturally benefits the product and the implementation of product features themselves of chatbots. So an example might be, we build workflows internally to perform certain tasks like send out meeting notes or do more complicated things like write requirements documents. We can use the learnings from those to fuel how we build out chatbots and more complicated agents and mechanisms and architectures within our system itself. So I'd say having AI imbued deeply within the company ethos and infrastructure is important at the operational level, and that translates to the product level.
Right. And that's actually very astute observation. I think we've seen some of that in some of our customers as well, meaning that as we build product, we have to understand the customer. But with the technology so new, how do you understand the customer before the customer already start using it? So there's a very different way. Like in the past, we hear customer feedback, we build product, right? And then we launch to market. Now, because the technology is so new, customer hasn't used it yet. So how do you get, quote unquote, the feedback, the understanding of the product you're going to launch that doesn't even exist today in any form or fashion, so that the sort of the internal usage is a really good example, especially when you build tools that support a business organization, a business operation, right? So that's really smart to incorporate that. Do you want any comment to that?
Yeah, I would. One comment I'd make there is I wouldn't lose sight of product fundamentals when it comes to evaluating AI. You've got to understand users deeply. You've got to understand their pain points, understand the value they obtain from you solving those pain points, and then you objectively evaluate a given AI solution maybe to see if it's fit for purpose. So whereas it's self-evident that AI is going to be solving a lot of these problems, but still go through the scientific method, and you form a hypothesis, you test it, you iterate quickly, and then you go from there. So I'd still make sure you hold on to your kind of product 101 hat, and just make sure you're still going by those principles.
Yeah, so that actually leads to two things very important, right? So one is understand the capability of the technology, because you have to use it to understand it and then read it and all that stuff, right? So I know a lot of companies and our teams are definitely struggling with this to even know what type of capabilities available. Is evolving so quickly, so we can park that for a second. And the other one is, how do we take that capability that's constantly evolving into still solving customer needs and problems, but now in a new ways of solving that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's actually lead to something that you mentioned earlier about the data. So you have a chatbots and et cetera for customer use, and you start to see some of the gaps in terms of data and others. So maybe double click a little bit on how does it change some of the sort of the enabling or supporting functions outside of traditional sort of SDLC product development?
Enabling supporting functions. So yeah, I think essentially what you're doing there is you're asking a very fundamental question of your data architecture. So if you're talking about not just product operations, but product infrastructure, architecture, and so on. I think what's happened is there are very fundamental questions that have to be asked in terms of how we're building our product, how our data domains are connected. It's become evident that AI hooked up in the right way will solve a lot of problems and make advisor workflows much smoother. So getting back to basics with how we've built our system, asking very deep questions and rebuilding with the end goal in mind of not just enabling one chatbot but many is one example of supporting function that we need to pay attention to. The other supporting functions, I'd say, especially in my industry, things like infosec, compliance, legal. While within our company they're adopting AI for their own individual workflows, they're still beholden to higher powers like the government. So it's tricky aligning even internal stakeholders with what we want to do with the PDLC, and you've got to kind of find ways around that and think of ways of mitigating the slowdown, the drag you get from some of those constraints. And one of the ways we've thought about doing that is rather than so I'll back up just slightly there, but one of the things we can do with the PDLC is, we can obviously have engineers do more tickets and build more things more quickly. But what we can also do is take the same time they've saved and pull them earlier into the PDLC process. Take an engineer, a product manager, and a designer, say, and have them the Venn diagram of their different responsibilities, have them overlap further, so they're doing more discovery amongst themselves. I've long been a proponent of having engineering involved in ideation very early in the process. They have a unique perspective on things, and I think the advent of AI gives us the opportunity to do that very well. It's just a matter of executing on that idea in the right way, and you don't want to do that within an organization with hundreds of engineers overnight. So one of the things we do to enable that is, we spinning up some small teams, just teams of 5 people. Making sure we've got a really nice prototyping mechanism. We've got engineers involved up front and seeing what they can come up with. And that way we're experimenting quickly. We're seeing what works and what doesn't, and how that might translate to how it helps our organization at a larger scale.
Right. So very, very cool. Dang, you have a lot of you cover so many topics. I have to break down.
Sorry.
So let's talk about the first one. And I think it's really relevant, which is the PDL. So AI basically collapses everything. When I say collapse, because everything moving so quickly, in the past it was the passing hands, right? And then now like everything's collapsing. Like in one end, it's like the Venn diagram between product engineering and design, it's become collapsing. And so that you shift them from like the end and to front, right? So solve some of the front end problem, which is the discovery and others, right? So I think the collapsing of the roles, responsibilities, and also the flow of PDLC is evident that we've seen everywhere. Now, the interesting about that, you mentioned the legal compliance and others, right? So they typically either at the front to give your sort of the feedback input that influence your product design, and or they come in the end. Sometimes you have both ways to say, well, did it meet the requirements? Can we go live or not go live, right? So actually, one of our customer, that's even before AI, not before, like before the Gen AI, so majorly adopted, right? So it's 3 years ago, they had this challenges already, right? So they would have the product design, but then in the end, where legal compliance come back to say A, B, C, D, you have to make changes, right? So once you build your PDLC, you want to make sure you bring them in early on, right? So that the legal compliance things can inform your design and scope. Is this happening like you're mentioning, or they still kind of like in the different space?
Yeah, we do that. So basically, there are 2 things there. One is making sure all stakeholders are aware of what's going on. Things are moving faster, therefore you need to make sure they're looped in as often as possible. Or you can just have a high trust environment where there obviously legal needs to be involved, whether you like it or not. But in other areas, maybe the executives trust you and you can spend all their money. The other area that's important there, which has the same impact, is dependencies. So, in an organization which is very kind of horizontally integrated across lots of different advisor tasks, we've got many, many Scrum teams. So having AI work quickly across all of them at the same time is difficult. It's something we're still learning. So I think the dependency understanding and having the communication points, always there is very, very important. But we haven't solved the problem necessarily, but it's understood that we need to kind of learn and iterate along the way.
Right. So actually, it's very interesting. I would call out 2 things, right? One of that is, like Anna mentioned earlier about the data, and you also mentioned the data, right? So now, and then you also, not only just the data, it's the data in a way that has meanings, right? The way we call it ontology, right? So PDLC, that's how we normally say it. But you really think about it is that the operating model would have these different objects, including your teams and others, so that the ontology of your operating model will hopefully give you visibilities and ability to trace down regardless of legal compliance and or dependencies. Do you have, as a side note, did you start to have smaller teams and more teams, or same team size?
So what we've done is we're experimenting still. So we're actually, taking individuals and teams and actually saying, okay, you work using this new methodology. We don't want to interrupt too much of what's going on day to day. I mean, obviously, people are using engineers are still more efficient, but actually we're adjusting the whole PDLC and front loading a lot of the work and emphasizing the importance of judgment and discovery and so on. We're doing that in smaller teams initially. So engineer, designer, product manager, one or two others, seeing how those pods work and going from there. So
Right.
yeah, rather than layering on too much on a kind of production critical team, we want to make sure we're doing it the right way and scaling the right way. I mean, a good example is, when Agile first, is a bit before my time, but when Agile was first introduced, we're talking about moving fast and breaking things and, getting everything done as fast as possible. We're trying to move fast and not break things with
Right.
in our organization, our industry. And AI, of course, gives us the opportunity to move as fast as possible. So it's a lot of things to balance along the way.
Yeah. I hear you. So one of the questions from the audience is that if your org is already very like chaotic, not very well organized, right? What are some of the things you start to help them to have structures and or just chaotic in the first place, and AI just accelerate exponentially. So what are some of the things that you've done? I mean, in some ways it's good that you're like a Dragonboat customer. You probably have some foundation already, but what would you recommend to companies that are not very good at SDLC, PDLC, and chaotic?
Yeah, good question. It's very industry and company dependent. Have a great portfolio management tool at your disposal, like Dragonboat. Do that. But beyond that, I think what you want to do is take a step back from AI for a second and just look at the fundamentals of product management, your PDLC. Make sure that's well defined. Where does it begin? Where does it end? What are the gates along the way? Just make sure those are adhered to. Make sure you got executive buy-in for executing on those, and then you can layer in how AI can augment and help gain efficiencies. So, you want to make sure you're defining your ideation phase. Once you've got ideas, how do they get added to the roadmap? What are the gates there? How do we agree? What are the metrics and so on and so forth? I don't need to over-explain, the details there, but I do think taking a step back and looking at your overall process operationally is one way to begin to unwind the chaos.
Right. And I want to say something kind of I've been hearing this more and more, so I want to say something that may be controversial, but it's definitely seen the case, right? Back in the days, there were waterfall, phase gates, handoffs, and templates and documentation. And those were put in place to have a guardrails for things to move, but then they slow things down because, it kind of eliminate the human judgment at a later part, right? So then Agile come in to say, hey, team can make autonomous decisions and then they can solve. There was like a speed, iterate, like move fast, break things. And also in a way that you have autonomous teams can, team and collaboration against the documentation, right? So because documentation is too slow. Now, you have AI employees, AI team members. And the challenge is the AI team members are not human. They don't have the context, knowledge, judgment, and all the other stuff. So that if the documentation is not there, if the process is not clear, if there's no, whatever the markup files and, what all the other things, that agent would just do their own way, right? This is something we call a drift. So when you work with an AI agent, at least in today's technology, at least in today's context window, it's almost in a way you do kind of have to have the guardrails for the sake of the agents, for the sake of the handoffs. What do you think about this, the sort of the potential change?
I think that's very true. I think that's very true, especially as we're beginning to understand them and we're getting new releases every few weeks with major new capabilities. The same prompt in Opus 4.6 in Claude could be different in 4.7. You need to be able to test out your priors, retest everything, operationally as well as within the PDLC. I do think it's important to make sure you have engineers and product folks be responsible for the agents they're using to execute workflows on their behalf. They're responsible for the output. It's like having a junior employee, a very fast one and capable one, but one which needs very specific direction. So they need that level of that responsibility. And yes, I do believe, depending on the industry and the team makeup, you do need certain guardrails put in place. Like an example within our industry is, so financial advisors, because they're dealing with a lot of money, they're very hesitant to trust an AI to do anything. So you can, unsurprisingly. So, in order to convince them that, hey, this is actually a good idea, it will gain you in the long run to mitigate that risk. We make sure an AI agent is making sure that they approve anything an AI agent does. They've got a list of the things that the AI agent has says, I'd like to do this. Here's an email. Here's a report. They can approve or they can adjust it as they see fit. I think that applies within a product and applies within the PDLC as well, more internally. You do need those gates and guardrails there to make sure we're not taking undue risk.
Right. And then I 100% agree with you in the way that now everyone, regardless or not, become a manager and an even harder manager than managing, human employee in a way where they move extremely fast, but their knowledge is very limited and you can't read their mind. So I think being able to really pick up some of those like setting goals and the setting measure and the traceability and validation is extremely important. And I also think you mentioned something important is they work on behalf of you, right? So we really need to make sure that the output or plan of the agents are being understood and aligned and reviewed by human. And otherwise, it is true. So that you do have to add a lot more checkpoints along the way at the bigger planning cycle and even at the task level as well.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that will alleviate over time. I've got lots of, my personal workflows I've got set up with Claude and Cowork myself. And over the first few iterations of it, it's a bit clunky and slow. I don't trust it. But after a few iterations, as long as it's not something business critical, I trust it and I don't check it as much. So I do think we'll learn where the strengths and weaknesses are over time and begin to draw back on some of those guardrails, but they do need to be there to start with.
Right. I 100% agree with you. I think over time we will get, the capability of the agent as well as the knowledge that they gain in our system and also the framework you put in for them, right? The knowledge base, all gonna just lead to less manual interference and a more automation. But that initial groundwork is very important to get to that level of trust, right? So one of the question we have from audience is around, if we were to plan forward 3 years, so what engineering aspect of development, prototyping can proceed very fast and smooth, even smoother than today. What is the left and strategy or judgment? What does it look like? How are you guys seeing the movement on that?
Yeah, I kind of agree with the comment there. It's going to be judgment, strategy, discovery, making sure you got all the right data. In the same way that you need data to feed an LLM model for your product, you need data to feed the product decision-making engine. So you need to make sure that's all correct and present. I think that's critical. In fact, that's kind of where I think people get lost along the way. And now that we've got engineers freed up, the mistakes made at an early level in the PDLC are going to be magnified. All of your competitors are going to have the same benefit of having freed up engineers, and they're going to be trying to front load a lot of the discovery. So you do need to put more emphasis on making better judgment calls. But you also have the opportunity to experiment more, which is difficult in some industries, but being able to iterate quickly and experiment allows you to hypothesize, test, and iterate more quickly. So yeah, the decisions are more important at an early stage, but you can make more of them and you can fail more potentially. But everyone else will be doing the same thing. So more pressure will be on product to discover well, I'd say.
Right. I really want to double click on that as well. I think the technology, one of the things technology, the AI related technology does is make the competitive playing field even more flat and challenging, right? So anyone has the same technology, anyone can move faster. Sometimes when you're in the market for a longer time has its drawback, but you also have a strength. You have a knowledge, you have experience, you have a lot more learning. So one of the things I will bring in, a recent conversation I had, it's actually on our podcast, it's going to be show soon, is that we've seen companies that did a few things. They put, they did a lot of prototyping and discovery. They say, hey, with AI, we don't want to do PRD. Let's put a prototype so that we can see the user and we get put it into the wild. But what happens is the speed of the prototyping is far exceed the rest of the PDLC. So then obviously there will be scaling back. So one of the things, obviously, that's the one thing of shifting bottlenecks, right? So certain parts are faster, the other parts are slower. So what are some of the parts that you've seen that, given the technology and the speed, what are the part become a slower? What are the bottlenecks? You mentioned one of them is like a discovery earlier. Do you see other? things?
I think discovery in early stage, we're still pretty early in the process here of really iterating through a more compressed cycle. So it's more philosophical than something we've lived through. But the discovery part is clearly important. Anything with a human touch or human interaction along the way, whether it's getting feedback through a prototype or it's stakeholder engagement or anything there where information is exchanged, not involving LLM agents, that's naturally going to be slower now or going to stick out more as a bottleneck. So I think there are plenty of those, compliance reviews, as we mentioned earlier, infosec. So I think I see all of those as bottlenecks. And as we mentioned earlier, I think it's going to involve more trust from the organization where it's available to mitigate those, or a very, very sound communication structure to make sure everything's understood and communicated, quickly along the way.
Right. So one of the things that we also hear is the customer. And you mentioned the customer a little bit, right? So your competitor can do the same thing, and there's more things coming to the market. Can customer even absorb all those?
Probably not. Probably not. So I think that's it. In my particular industry. If there's an industry kind of expert, Kitsy's, he has a website with this kind of fintech map of all the different tools and a financial advisor and their support staff might use, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them. It's a very fragmented industry. So it's very, very cutthroat and competitive, but very fragmented. And there's lots of different schools of thought, even before AI, as to how to attack that and how to gain a foothold there. So yeah, all the competitors will be adopting AI. And I do think the ones who are going to be more successful, everything else being equal, they're going to have a better story to tell. They're going to have done better discovery. They're going to understand pain points and be able to articulate the value they deliver to their customers better. Even if the fundamental underlying AI model is all Claude or all ChatGPT, I do think the story you tell as a product manager that reflects the quality of your knowledge of the customer is going to make the difference overall.
Right. And I want to double click on the topic around the customers and the value customer gets and they have, right? So one of the things, and again, sort of preaching the same area that I'm passionate about is product teams typically go all the way through to the end and they don't close back. Meaning you launch the product, right? And you launched and customer use, maybe you look at some metrics, but there's no system that connect everything back to you, at least the force to you, right? That's one of the things that when we have some of the customers start using Dragonboat more, they realize and say, hey, I actually close the loop so that we know where things are being used, where things are not used. And that would help the guy because like you said, anytime you have a human involved, right, including customer using your product, it is slowing down. So have you seen some of those in terms of, after product launch? I mean, obviously code is the fastest thing right now, so that we move the bottleneck to both sides. So when you after the code is released, from there to eventually driving value and the customer adoption, how does that evolve and change?
Yeah, good question. I don't think anyone's done that properly yet. I think you need to make sure you're measuring your leading indicators as much as possible to make sure your direct measurements of success, like immediate user adoption, are important. Lagging indicators like ARR or something higher level, that I don't think anyone has those answers yet. So we still want to measure the same things, but whether they're going to be successful or not is an open question. So I wouldn't necessarily change the way you're measuring it or looking at it, but I would. Yeah, we just need to keep a very close eye on it because it's a brand new unknown realm currently.
Yeah. So I hear you as well. I think one of the question we hear more and more is to say, we can do prototype fast, we can do discovery fast, but are we prototyping the right problem to solve? Are we discover the right user behavior? Is it because you have 90% of customer coming here to say this? Are they the things you should be working on? There's a lot of comfort in seeing data, but if you look deeper to say, okay, 90% of people say that, doesn't mean that's 90% of things you get, right? It doesn't mean really represent 90% of reality or truth. So I think that's sometimes, when people, I mean, this is like a classic already, but we've definitely seen customer to say, hey, we synthesized, they all said this, we built this, but it didn't really pan out to be what was the most important problem. And then coming back to realize, okay, even though we get a lot of data, right, and they are not really signals because these data represent only the people give you feedback. But it didn't say the people don't give you feedback don't important, not the best customers or other stuff. So how's that? What's your experience in that front?
It's fundamentally tricky. I'd say, obviously, to your point, the example there's inherent bias in the sampling of what you're trying to analyze. I think when you've got incomplete data like that, I like to, and you're not quite sure, I like to ask why a few times. This isn't necessarily AI related again, but it's more PDLC is,
right.
Really, it's a fundamental understanding of your user base, understanding exactly how your data is set up, how the different measuring mechanisms are set up, and making sure that, first of all, that's understood and the experiment's repeatable. But then, going back to your priors and your assumptions, and you might have a clean signal, and you may have to make some leaps of faith and assumptions in your next product decision, but you've just got to do the best possible thing you can based on the data you have. So I don't have a great answer for you there, but I do think product fundamentals come into play once again. But even if data isn't complete, you can still rely on it to interpret it in some way that will be useful to you.
Right. I think, this is sort of related to one of the questions around prioritization, right? It is very difficult to do prioritization from a product perspective. It's a portfolio perspective, right? So the obvious signal often is not the obvious data is often not the real signal, right? So I think that, if I would adding more to it is, like you said, how do you set up measure of product impact is probably even more critical, and how do you close the loop with your PDLC? AR is anything financial lag indicator doesn't matter, right? But the only way we can quote unquote see, like, there's this sort of like what do they behave and then what do they say are very different. That what they behave makes a lot more important, like a product management practice, right? So then we have to understand how they behave, and that will be how do you bring that in to say the people behave, the people who behave the way we want to behave, do they say that? Can we get others to behave like that? So that we're really connecting more dots of your PDLC, right?
Yeah, I agree. There are lots of ways of helping do that. You can have, lighthouse users who it depends on what kind of industry you're in, if it's retail or enterprise, but lighthouse users, ones who are power users, ones who are representative of what you consider to be with it directly in your ICP, instead of hoping that you get the right data points from people arbitrarily clicking like or not or don't like. You can actually pick some people who really you've convinced are representative of strong users of your product and would want indicative of what would resonate with the rest of your user base if you built those things. So I think that's a good way to go as well, is take a subset of existing users and begin to weight some of their ideas more heavily.
Right. So there's a very interesting question I want to bring in from audience, which is, assume the speed to market is actually reduced. So what would be the greatest impact on competition within the sector? Let's say we don't ship product daily, we ship product monthly. What would be some of the impact?
So if speed to market is reduced, meaning we're shipping products more often, you mean?
Less frequent.
Less frequently. If speed to market is reduced, would we be shipping more often?
Speed to market.
Am I misunderstanding?
What do okay. All right. It's speed to market is reduced. Time to market reduced, that's fast. Speed to market means slower. So I can't really tell which one the question is. Speed is reduced versus the time is reduced. So we know we're dealing with a situation where just time to market is reduced, right?
Yeah.
So I think that obviously that is a reality for everyone. Time to market is reduced everywhere. And then we're talking about exactly that. So if that's the case, then I think it would continuously discuss the same thing, right? The time to market is reduced, then we have to figure it out, like we are competing in the same. We have a much more competitor.
Yep.
And we would, sort of the strategy and the judgment and all the other things coming through. But I would say, let's just hold on speed, like shipping speed for a minute. What if we slow down? If we were to say, if we want to slow down, do we ever want to slow down?
That's a loaded question, but it's a good one. I think it depends on the naturally, because we can ship faster with AI, we want to ship faster, we want to experiment more and do more things, and that comes with its own inherent risk. I think it's down to the industry, down to the company culture to forge the balance there between, hey, we can do things fast, but the alternative is we can do more at the same speed. Maybe you want to ship more features in one go, or put more a fully fledged product in one go that's going to resonate with the market as opposed to doing a half-baked MVP. I think that's a fair point and a fair trade-off. And I think you just need to understand your customer base and the market in order to do that. And that kind of harks back to our previous conversation around metrics and measurement and really understanding the signals and what they mean and how to interpret them. So all of that is important.
Right, right. I agree with you on, really looking at the metrics and signals, right? If you have reached sort of the diminishing return or negative return do your product development, then you shouldn't invest in this area anymore. Maybe you can invest in innovative product. Maybe you should move money from product development to marketing to sales, right? You have to take a CEO view. Maybe I'm biased, but I think product managers are typically, and then more, right, will be you're not product manager. You are portfolio investors, right? All this, you have more agents do the work. You invest in agents, and you also, everything you do require cost, right? Regardless it's your agent's consumption or you have a go-to-market team, everything you initiate is a cost until it turns into ROI, the customer paying for it, or customer stay. So if you can ship really fast, but then if the metrics tell you, like you said, right, Hakan, that the customer not adopting or they are not adopting more, you're not driving business impact, then you want to shift your investment somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the inclination is to say, from putting on my CEO hat for a moment, is okay, we've got so much investment and we're getting this much output. We're gaining loads of efficiencies and productivity gains from AI. So we're getting more output for a given investment. Why would we scale that back or move it? Why not just put more investment in and get more returns, more amplified returns at the end of it? But that's just one side of the equation. There's a lot more to think about.
Right. So I saw Anna come back. Is there a
Yes.
timeout?
We are almost, maybe we can, I don't know if we have one last question in the chat. I'm just checking. If not, I think we can wrap up. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen again.
Could we take one more question in before we kind of wrap up? It was
Sure.
really good. Lots of great question coming from the audience. We covered quite a few of them. There one thing I think about is the maybe you just have a quick takeaway. I think on your team, your company have done a lot of different experimentations and learnings. If for some of the teams that you heard from an audience question, right? So either some of the companies are relatively earlier, not earlier, they have a different infrastructure to run their product portfolio. So they're, either chaotic or they don't have a good process or they don't know how to prioritize and they struggle with that. What will be the top maybe two or three things for companies that are, not quite there yet in terms of how they operate, or, you think that's the most beneficial for the teams to adjust or bring changes into their organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one for me at the top of the list is bear in mind that what's happening now is in the past we had products which would launch something significantly better every once every few years or months at best. Now we're getting AI capabilities which are essentially new products, new paradigm shifting products every few weeks or months or as often as that. So what's important isn't to react directly to the fact I can create a PowerPoint now much more easily than I could 6 months ago. What's important is to develop the muscle for you to be able to test your priors, manage the fact that things are being released at a fast cadence, test them, iterate, and make sure you're operationally set up in such a way that you can take advantage of all the new capabilities coming out very fast. Don't just react to them. Be ready to use them, straight out of the gate. I think that's number one, and that's what we're trying very hard to do at my current company. So number two, we've already covered this, but when we're getting excited about compressing the PDLC, getting engineers involved early on in the process, don't do that too quickly. Experiment first. Build small teams. Make sure that you understand. We're all learning, right? People who adopted Agile are still learning now or don't know how to. So this will be the same kind of adoption curve. Make sure you're testing, understanding, making it fit for your company. I think that's very important too. Number three is don't just lump agents up there. If you have agents without the data infrastructure, you just get eloquent nonsense. If you have without that, it's a problem. So the data infrastructure applies both at the product level and at the operational level. Make sure you got the muscle there to understand how to manage these AI tools. You've got collective workflows amongst your organization, and you can have everyone collectively move forward with the AI journey. So those are the three I'd say are worth considering.
It's awesome. I really love the I think audience like the eloquent nonsense, especially say you 3 bullet points go to whatever LLM and turn into 3-page. And then go to another hand, it turn into something else. That is really, really critical. And I would also say, the reason we started Dragonboat, and I truly believe that is when you run a product, which we run a product and portfolio, and then when you don't have a data model for you to run product, there's no way you can learn anything. There's no learning per se, right? So how do you go through your workflow and how does we call it ontology, right? How your product operating model ontology, it's represented. It's the only way you can learn. Agents can perform better when you have a source of truth. Same thing for your PDLC. When your PDLC don't have a source of truth, so that you don't really know what investment drive outcome, you don't really know where you invest, where your dependencies goes. That is a big challenging. So more than ever, if you want speed, you need structure. If you want alignment, you need structure. Alignment and speed don't have to be enemies. So I think that is very important for us to say, if we go into the new world, and if we don't have a source of truth to run product, it's going to be very challenging. Eloquent nonsense. I like that.
That's a really great way to wrap up this session. So thank you, Hakan, for joining us today. Thank you, Becky, for guiding the conversation. So here in the slide, you have helpful resources, so you can get in touch with Hakan on LinkedIn. Or join our Slack to keep the conversation going. The link is going to be dropped in the chat by Leah. And if today's chat sparked some ideas around navigating the AI-driven PDLC, just like Hakan is doing right now, Dragonboat can really help you and be your partner. So check it out at dragonboat.ai. And with that, it's a wrap. So a huge thank you again to Hakan and Becky for an incredible chat. And thank you all for joining us today and having some great questions coming out from the chat. So stay tuned in our Slack, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.